Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Hi, all successful nurse coaches. It is Shelby here. I am coming to you again with another client interview. This is Tracy Weber. Tracy is in our year-long apprenticeship space currently right now. Tracy works with women. I'm sure she would also work with men as well, but she works with women who are in the middle of Lyme or recovering from Lyme specifically, and her journey and her story on how she worked through Lyme herself and then also how she got into coaching are like really fascinating to me. And I've been waiting, she knows this, I've been waiting for a coach to step up into the Lyme coach seat, and hopefully she doesn't feel like I forced her into it, but I'm glad that she's exploring this space, and I'm so excited to hear a little bit more from her and share her journey with all of you today. So Tracy, kick us off with the basics. Tell us where you're from, and if there's well, we have time. So whatever about your Lyme journey that you are comfortable sharing, I am willing to hold space for it on our interview today.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so currently I am in Dubuque, Iowa, but hoping eventually to get back west where I'm originally from. But serving people all over because I've got a compact license. So opens up a few extra doors, which is nice. Yeah, and as far as Lyme goes, I was diagnosed in 2013. And it was sort of like dominoes at that point, because after that, all three of my kids ended up being diagnosed. And then my husband at the time as well, in the course of probably 12 to 18 months, all of us ended up with that diagnosis. And it's a really long journey for healing. And there's very little support in that community and a lot of questions about the diagnosis and the assumption that once you've been treated, that everything is better and you should be fine after a 2-week or maybe 3-week course of antibiotics if you're lucky. And that just wasn't the case for us. So yeah, it was a long road back to health for all of us.
I feel a little silly admitting this, but Lyme was something I knew existed, but it felt like something other people struggled with. Like that was never within my realm of like people I knew that struggled with that. And my first business coach that I hired was experiencing severe Lyme symptoms, and God bless her. Like she went and got like a port put in and was getting IV infusions for like, I think a year. And I was working with her that whole time and she didn't like let on at all until she was on the other side of it. But yeah, it feels like, I think you call them invisible illnesses, right? They like can affect, I mean, of course, Lyme doesn't have a preference on who it gets a hold of. So what was the moment when you figured out what was going on? Because from what I remembered in your story, was there how much time from when like you started feeling symptomatic to when you knew like it was Lyme?
I was actually pretty lucky in that regard. I started developing really severe symptoms on New Year's Day, and was seeing an acupuncturist at the time for some other symptoms. And then as every single joint in my body started blowing up, I'm like, hey, what do you think this is? And she was really astute to that sort of thing and told me that was her suspicion. But I never had a history of a tick bite that I'm aware of. And so I kind of sat on it for a while, but then, 2 months into it, I was still just really, really sick and went for my normal checkup to see what's going on, what can we do? And my doctor at the time wanted to draw a whole bunch of labs. So I said, hey, why don't you just throw this extra one in? And she did. And that's literally the only one that came back positive. And it's sort of a crapshoot if you show up positive. The testing is not very reliable at all. So I feel pretty fortunate that it did show up on me. So it was easy to start treatment at least right away.
And I know that like we could probably spend the rest of our time talking about the nuances of treatment, because you went through like the antibiotics and then felt a little better and then still didn't get all the way better. That's such a triggering word. I'm sorry, but in your healing, what was missing for you? What support was missing?
Any support, really. The doctors, like I said, the doctors question you after you aren't completely healed, so to speak. I went to a really well-renowned infectious disease specialist, and he said, well, then you must have chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or arthritis.
Yes, but why?
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly. So yeah,
Wow.
specialist after specialist, and really, you have the answer on a paper, but no one believes you after a certain point and make you feel like you're kind of losing your mind and like you don't know what you're talking about, even though you have a medical background. So I can't imagine people who don't have that background and don't advocate for themselves.
I think about that every day, like even navigating my own heart stuff. I'm like, how do people do this who don't know the anatomy of a heart, that don't know the right questions to ask? And gosh, if anyone listening is feeling passionate about being a patient advocate, there's a whole business I'm sure that you could have just doing that, and you would be extra equipped as a coach to do that. I think about it all the time. Okay, so what are you hoping to bring to the table for the Lyme community, Tracy? Because I can imagine that you have some feelings about not being listened to and being made to feel like crazy is a strong word, but that you weren't in touch to what was going on in your body.
Yeah, I think just giving people hope that they're not losing their mind and that there is an answer to whatever they're dealing with, whether it's Lyme or some other illness or, some other cause, that there's hope that they can get better and that there are support systems out there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. And I don't want, if anyone's dealing with any sort of invisible illness, that seems to be a common thread within our nurse coaching community. I know a lot of nurses that have recovered with Lyme and other sorts of autoimmune type things, that we have a really special community here to where you never, or hopefully never, made to feel like you don't know what's going on and that there's no hope and there's no chance to heal. But I'm curious if there was something that you could tell someone who's experiencing weird symptoms, like they're not making sense, their doctors are not believing them, or maybe not taking them totally seriously, or they want to wait, or their labs came back negative, but they're still having these symptoms. Where would you tell them to go?
The biggest piece of advice is just stick with your intuition. And if something feels off, it is, and there are resources. So whether it's me helping them to find those answers or someone else, find someone who can partner with you to get the answers. Just don't give up,
Yeah. Do you find that like one set of practitioners are better at finding whatever is going on? So like, is it functional medicine? Is it more like, is there a specific group that are better trained? That's the word I'm looking for. Better trained at finding the root cause?
Hands down, I would absolutely say either functional or integrative practitioners, but unfortunately that's usually out of pocket. And so that's kind of the other component of Lyme and other illnesses, is that a lot of times you just pay and pay and pay to get the answers. Because that group tends to be a lot more open-minded.
Yeah. And then the answer to this might be no, but this, I know it's something that you and I talk about all the time, is the financial burden of having an invisible illness of Lyme or something else going on. Did you ever find any resources to help with the financial burden, or was it all on you?
Unfortunately, it was all on us. I think in some instances, there are certain foundations that have smaller grants and money available. But those are hard to come by, as you might imagine, because there's a lot of people trying to get those funds and there are certain requirements. So no, unfortunately, it was, for us, it was all out of pocket for treatment.
Man, there's another opportunity there too. Maybe a nonprofit is in your future, Tracy.
Thinking about that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I get unsettled when there's not like clear and cut answers for people who are suffering, right? Of like, oh, you can reach out here and do this thing and they have financial aid or whatever. But I think that that is just shining a light on where our room for improvement is, and like where nurse coaches can also step in and build that. That is a part of, I think, our job title, what we've taken on in this new adventure of creating what nurse coaches actually do for a living, right? Okay, so Tracy, tell me a little bit about business and just what that experience has been like for you, because this isn't the first time that you've owned your own business. You are also a trained massage therapist. And so I'm curious on maybe what that was like transitioning from being a business owner before to being like a nurse coach specific business owner.
Honestly, that's been a little bit of a struggle. And I think because it took me about 2 years to get really consistent with my massage therapy practice. Built it from the ground up. And once it was established, it was just good. And so I've been used to, for a couple decades, success, and then now I come back at square one and I'm like, I wanted it to be there yesterday. I wanted to have it established because I've been successful so far. And now I'm impatient. I just don't want to wait for it. And then trying to juggle, like keeping a practice going and then building a separate practice, because they are, even though there's similarities and overlap, they're also very different populations. And so that, and then you throw COVID in the mix and it's just been a disaster in many ways.
Yeah.
A lot of different struggles.
Absolutely. I love the first part of that story where you're like, it took me 2 years to fill my practice, but then like that 2 years doesn't apply to this journey. Which I would probably feel the exact same way of like, oh, I already did the new part over here. It should just translate to this, but nurses, we want to avoid, and myself included in this box, like I didn't want to be in the new phase. I didn't want to be in the figuring it out phase. I just wanted to like show up and do the coaching bit and then then go eat dinner and like be done. So that being said, I think that you have unique experience of not actually being totally new in this entrepreneur space. Like that like that 2-year limbo period, hopefully we get to accelerate it, and it not take a full 2 years this time. But for all of those new practice nurse coaches out there, or people who are thinking about creating their own coaching practice, what would you tell them? Like, what would be the piece of advice that you would want to pass along for the people to come behind you?
I think it's, there's a lot of overlap with illness, and if you just keep that persistence and that hope and that knowing that you can get there, I think that's the biggest key, like having faith and confidence in yourself and finding the resources to help you get to where you want to go. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's knowing that the light is at the end of the tunnel. We maybe don't know like how far it is away, but knowing that it's there. And on the other side of that coin, I'm curious, what advice would you give yourself? Because we started working together at the beginning of this year-ish. And you know more than you knew then. So what a piece of advice would you give younger 2021 Tracy?
Listen to my body. There were things going on in my personal life that didn't align with who I am and where I'm going. And it took me a while to see that. And so just listening to that and acting sooner than later.
Yeah, body wisdom is real. It's a real one. Thank you for sharing that with us. Hold on, I think. Am I frozen for you, Tracy?
No.
Okay, you're frozen for me. I'm going to pause for a second. All right, Tracy. So if people are experiencing Lyme, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, or even sometimes cancer, they are a good candidate to reach out to you for support in your coaching. That sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
I see a
can
lot
plug
of
you
that.
here to offer support. And like I said, if you're listening to this and you are just feeling a little weird or off, or maybe you've been shrugged off by your doctors and no one is listening, jump on a call with Tracy. She'll be able to help you pin down what the next right move could be for you, and just be in your corner supporting you along your journey and getting a diagnosis. But I think that this is so important because, like I said in the beginning, even as a nurse, I knew Lyme existed, but I didn't know how devastating it can be for people who get that diagnosis or for families. And I think that having a safe space where you are believed and heard and held is crucial for your healing on the emotional and spiritual side of things. But yes, Tracy, thank you so much for joining me here today. Everyone needs to know what a Lyme coach is, what invisible illness is. I will join you in screaming this from the rooftops. But yeah, if anyone needs to reach out to Tracy, I will put her email and you can reach out to her on Facebook, let her know where you came from. And yeah, we'll be seeing more of you, Tracy, out on the internet.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelby.
You're welcome.